Hello and welcome to the first episode of Ryan's Game Quest. This is a show focused on video games. I love video games so much, and I have my entire life, and I finally decided to create this extension of myself to talk about this passion that I have, like many of you who may be listening. I want to maybe try and make this a regular weekly show, talking about what I'm playing, interesting topics, and relevant news, which we'll definitely get into here later today. But before we get anywhere, though, a few things need to be established. First of all, who am I, why the name, and what's going on here? To explore this, I'd like to go a little bit into my early history as a gamer. I often like to say that my gaming consciousnness came online in the year 2000, the year I turned 6. The year before I was introduced officially to video games when my dad gave me his brick gray OG Game Boy, with Frogger and Tetris. And I played these games endlessly, and on the first levels, having almost no idea what I was actually trying to accomplish. But I loved it. Little did my father know that these games actually served an instrumental purpose in my understanding of video games. Having these as my base allowed me to begin a progression of love and understanding for this medium. And around this time, we also had a family PC where I played all the humongous entertainment titles, be it Pajama Sam, Spy Fox, Putt Putt, Freddy Fish, and these are excellent pixel graphic children's entertainment titles, and I can make a whole episode about this. And then that fated day, my 6th birthday, August the year 2000, my mom brought me to their room where she opened the bedside table to reveal my gifts, a blue Game Boy Color along with 2 games, Pokemon Yellow and Dragon Warrior 3. It was really off to the races from there. And as I grew older, I would go on to become obsessed with both of these series and obsessed with gaming in general. Because of Pokemon, my path led me initially down the Nintendo road. Growing up, we were fortunate to have pretty much every main Nintendo console from the N64 on, and then in my early teens, I made my first console purchase with the PS2. It was here that I would also continue my appreciation and adoration for Dragon Quest. And as you may or may not have now caught on, I've decided to name my channel Ryan's Game Quest, in part after the Dragon Quest series. I'm a massive fan of role-playing games and Japanese role-playing games with Dragon Warrior, Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, Suikoden, Pokemon, Persona, Shin Megami Tensei. I think the name sums it up pretty well. And I've sort of gone back and forth between these systems throughout the years. Like after the Xbox 360, I went to PS4, picked up an Xbox Series S during the pandemic in 2020, and now I found myself back with PlayStation, having purchased the PS5 Slim earlier this year. And here we are. We're here in 2024. I'm 30 years old and I'm still playing games. And I have a lot to talk about. I've been playing a lot of games this year and I'm ready to do it. So without further ado, let's go. So the year in gaming for me in 2024 has been a pretty big year overall, as I finally made the jump to the PlayStation 5. Now prior to this, I had an Xbox Series S, and I picked this up in 2020. Now around that time, I didn't have a whole lot of expendable income, so this was a very convenient, cheap, and easy option of getting into gaming. Microsoft at the time, if you remember, had a $1 Game Pass deal, which absolutely sweetened the deal for me, and I got it mainly for Halo Infinite. Everything that after that was a bit disappointing in my opinion. We had Redfall, Hellblade 2, and Starfield, all of which just really weren't hitting it for me. And I also started to miss physical media. Now, with the Xbox Series S, Microsoft has 2 main consoles that they are running with this console generation. The Xbox Series S, which is a purely all-digital device, meaning it doesn't have a disk drive, so you can't buy discs for it. And then they have the Xbox Series X, which is a lot more powerful and does have a disk drive, so you can collect physical media for that device. And I started to miss this. Things on PlayStation also seemed way more appealing between the Final Fantasy series, Stellar Blade, Helldivers 2, Demon's Souls, Astrobot, Black Myth Wukong, Ratchet and Clank, Returnal. There's a lot that I had missed in the last couple of years that I wanted to get into. And overall, my thoughts on the PlayStation 5 are very positive. I love it. I think it runs well. I even think the slim model is huge. Like I picked it up and I pulled it out of the box and was like, oh my goodness, this thing's massive. I also think between all the controllers, I do favor PlayStation. I prefer the equal dual sticks compared to the Xbox or Switch offset design. Alright, so now let's get talking about some video games. I want to discuss in detail 2 games that easily come to the forefront of my mind when thinking about 2024 in gaming. The first one that I want to discuss is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. and this was developed and published by Square Enix, and this is easily one of my favorite games overall from this year. I played Final Fantasy VII Remake on PS4 and thought it did such an excellent job with the first main section of the original game having taken place in the industrial city of Midgar. Rebirth takes a slightly different approach, albeit staying very true to the original. In the original Final Fantasy VII, at this point in the game, it was more or less the open world portion. Now, in the original Final Fantasy VII, it opens up and stays open for the rest of the game, and it seems like they're also taking this into the third game, which has been announced, but we don't yet have a title for it. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, for those unaware, is the second entry in a turn of remakes of the original Final Fantasy VII, which released in 1997 on the PlayStation 1. The original game had a turn-based combat system where you'd select an attack, item, magic, and the subsequent action or actions selected would be displayed on the screen or field of battle. Since Final Fantasy XV, the series has taken a more modern-style approach to the gameplay and action, meaning you play the game in real time. What's awesome is that you have the option to slow this down a bit by choosing more thought-out attacks or spells, and with this considering, for instance, which enemy you want to select. In the original, you always had a party of 3, and they've kept this the same in Remake and Rebirth. Jumping between characters feels great, and I use just about everyone, and there are moments where they section certain characters off, forcing you to maintain a party that maybe you're not as used to. And I think if I had to choose, my favorite party members would be Yuffie and Red 13. They're just so much fun to play. And before I get into my overall thoughts, I've mentioned these different numbered games. If you don't know, each Final Fantasy game is completely different from the other. For example, main characters don't cross over into the next numbered title in the series. Square Enix has been developing new entries in the series alongside the Final Fantasy VII remakes, with Final Fantasy XVI being the most recent and released in 2023. The things I love about this game are the characters, the combat, and the story. The last maybe hour and a half-ish and final boss of this game are absolutely insane. I loved every bit of it. The implications the story has not only on the original, which if you're not aware, these remakes aren't actually remakes. They certainly follow similar beats, and I won't spoil anything here for anyone if you haven't jumped in, but if you've played these games, you know that they aren't exactly one-to-one. This is another reason why I love this game. As essentially sequels, the world gets a bit more fleshed out with deeper story and character revelations that really had me on the edge of my seat. The only thing I wasn't totally into was the abundance and frequency of minigames. There weren't many in the original game, but here they're almost everywhere. Most of the time it had to do with controls or precision needed in some of them to complete, but honestly beyond that, I had an amazing time with this game, and I can't wait for the final entry. The next game I want to talk about is one that released recently, and it's Metaphor ReFantazio. Now, this was developed by Studio Zero and published by Sega and Atlus. This is another Japanese role-playing game that I played this year, and like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, had a ton of anticipation going into it. Studio Zero is a subsidiary within Atlus, and Atlus has been the home and creators of the Shin Megami Tensei and Persona series. While those games have a more modern setting, with each entry featuring the protagonist, often as a student, having to navigate the social hills and valleys of life in school, this new game, Metaphor ReFantazio, is quite diametrically opposite to those games. It takes place in an alternate, almost medieval world setting, albeit with things like kings, dragons, magic, or as they call it in the game, magla, and such and so forth. Many of the themes in the game involve racial issues and class structure. You play as one of the last remaining people of your tribe, the Elda. And while it may be different in setting and theme than the other series, the core turn-based gameplay continues. Another core feature in each series is the function of social links, creating bonds with other characters that will unlock new story beats, side missions, and gameplay tactics like new skills and abilities. In the Persona games, you had personas, essentially monsters or minions that you'd summon to your aid in the thick of battle. In Metaphor, this role is translated to archetypes. Think of it like a class system, like warrior, healer, sniper, knight, etc. These can all ultimately become combined, and with the right leveling and bonds you create, you can mix, match, and switch between different abilities to different archetypes. I loved this system and became obsessed with unlocking as many as I possibly could. The other thing this game takes inspiration from is the calendar. In Persona and Metaphor, the game is basically divided between days on a calendar. You're often given the end date of a certain mission or quest, and you can choose what to do in the game between that time. This means you can choose to go level up in a dungeon, spend time with different characters, increasing or leveling up social bonds, or doing things like cleaning your mode of transportation, the Gauntlet Runner. This is a sick, awesome-looking hybrid between a boat and a tank. And you can basically do things like wash your party's clothes to gain magic points, or read a book to increase special royal statistics that will build up over time in the game. And this game oozes with style and art direction. Between the music and soundtrack to all the little individual animations in each menu system, it's all incredible to look at and a joy to play while navigating the world. I really enjoyed the combat and turn-based battles in this, and really enjoyed when it ramped up in difficulty towards the end. Some of the more end-stage bosses had me thinking in entirely new ways around gameplay, mechanics, and strategies, and it was awesome to experience that. I thought the themes and stories overall in the game were done so very well, and there were many twists and turns, sometimes multiple within the same cutscene. And at the end, while I thought everything being shown and laid out before me was told in an expertly manner, I did find the ending to be a little bit predictable. What's cool, though, is that this takes nothing away from my enjoyment overall of the game. It also came into my personal life at a weird moment. A few weeks back when Metaphor released, I had begun the first few hours of my journey, and when I left my apartment that evening to go pick up some takeout, I was attacked by a dog. Kind of a crazy situation, and I ended up with stitches on my right hand, but this made playing any video game a challenge for me for a period of time. Thankfully, Metaphor ReFantazio is not a very difficult game on the hands. As with other most turn-based role-playing games, actions are done with simple button prompts. The world navigation is fairly linear, with clearly marked places to go and people with which to spend time with and talk to, and the menus make it easy to immediately go to somewhere like a weapon shop or an inn. This made it all so that I could essentially play most of the game with one hand. I'm back to normal now, the stitches are out, I'm totally fine, and I can use my right hand to type, use a mouse, a gamepad, or whatever, and ultimately do all the same things I could prior to that attack. So overall, with Metaphor ReFantazio, this is going to be a very memorable game, one that I can look back to and link a real personal life event to. And while the real-life event was awful, many real-life events, certainly within this year, are, Metaphor provided not only an escape, but a reflection into a fantasy world that's much like ours. Even the name of the game itself is self-referential to that notion. The game also doesn't shy away from linking real-world themes. It very much hits you right on the head with everything. My overall thoughts on Metaphor ReFantazio are highly positive, with an experience that captivated me from beginning to end, a story that rivals some of the best in the role-playing game and Japanese role-playing game genre, and in my opinion exceeds that in previous Persona titles. And as I wrap it up, I do want to say the characters are all amazing. Haizme in particular is probably going to be up there with some of my favorite characters in games of all time. Incredible writing, a masterful pace. This game is excellent, and if you're a fan of Japanese role-playing games like myself, I think this deserves your time. So now those weren't the only two games that I played this year. I played a bunch of other stuff, a bunch of other bigger games, some smaller games, independent titles. Some of these I'll discuss a little in detail, and others, sheesh, there's so many, I just gotta fire through them. One of them is Animal Well. This is a game created and developed by one person, Billy Basso. So the art, the music, everything, all one guy. And published by Big Mode. Big Mode is YouTuber's company, Donkey, and this is their first release title. Animal Well is a 2D adventure game with beautiful pixel graphics. You play this little rock bug dude collecting different flames from different animals. That's the main sort of story, if you will, of the game. One of the most fun games I played this year in terms of navigation and discoveries. This is such a cozy and dank game. The music is so chill. The sound effects are all really satisfying, almost binaural. Sometimes taps into something primordial almost. The puzzles, I think, were all designed very well. Nothing was necessarily challenging, more like brain teasers. Once you get it, you got it. The tools the game gives you are all used in really smart ways. For example, you obtain a yo-yo, and it can be used to both distract certain animals, while also giving you extra reach to maybe hit a switch or open a door. Another example would be the fireworks, which can illuminate dark rooms, but can also kill ghost enemies in the game. The game does a great job of funneling you down the right path, even at times you think you may not be equipped enough or don't exactly know how to do something. And I was addicted to this from start to finish. This was one of the games that I earned the Platinum Trophy on, so I completed it 100%. Animal Well's awesome. I highly recommend this. Another game I played was, oh boy, another role-playing game. This was a Yuden Chronicle 100 Heroes. This is a spiritual successor to the Suikoden games, Japanese role-playing games where you often take place in the middle of a war, and you're tasked ultimately with collecting or recruiting massive amounts of characters to aid you in battle. Eiyuden Chronicles 100 Heroes was released earlier this year in April and was initially led by the Suikoden series creator Yoshitaka Murayama. Murayama unfortunately passed away this year, just a few months prior to the game's release. I thoroughly enjoyed moving through the world recruiting these allies to my cause. Sometimes this happens with a split narrative between three main characters, and I thought the handling of this narrative worked really well. There is one storyline, not with the three main characters, but something separate, that feels a little bit out of place, but otherwise I felt the story and writing felt grounded and not over the top. The turn-based combat felt great. I love taking all my heroes, mixing them up, and finding out what works best. Another game that I played this year and that I also earned the Platinum Trophy for was Tales of Kenzera Zhao. This is a Metroidvania-esque game that I played this year, and it hit me personally at an interesting time. The game follows a young shaman named Zhao, who, after the death of his father, is tasked by the god of death with the promise to revive his father to collect the souls of three gods. You navigate the world with two main mask-based weapons, a melee-focused sun mask, and a range option in the Mask of the Moon. The gameplay is fun and solid. As with most Metroidvania-style games, you fight enemies, solve puzzles, and unlock new abilities and upgrades in order to traverse to new areas of the game map. The game was developed by Surgent Studios and their lead creative director, Abu Bakr Salim, who you may know from Assassin's Creed Origins or the most recent season of Game of Thrones House of the Dragon, not only voices the lead protagonist, but created this story inspired by the loss of his father and his own experience with grief and loss. Now, I connect with this because I experienced grief and loss this year. So, again, it just goes to show that real life has a profound effect on the way games are created and, in turn, how we play them and how they're played and interpreted by the player. I absolutely love this game. It's excellent. And with this last sort of short list of games that I played this year, I'll go through these somewhat relatively quickly. I played Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. This is the DLC or expansion that came out for Elden Ring, which released back in 2022. And I played the base game on Xbox and played it through 3 times. I did need to complete the game 2 additional times since I'm now on PlayStation 5, so I had to get up to New Game Plus, again, in order to get to the expansion Shadow of the Erdtree. I love it. Just a quick thought, it's fantastic. It's amazing. I'm a huge fan of Dark Souls and the Souls series from Software, and I think this expansion knocks it out of the park. And then there's these other chunk of games that I played that didn't necessarily come out this year, but I've found a explosion of interest with them, and they are roguelike games, mainly inspired by Vampire Survivors. Couple choice key games that I played that are within this genre are Hollow Cure, Death Must Die, and Halls of Torment. I think these are all great additions to the ever-growing pantheon of these survivor-like games. And lastly, some other new games that I played this year were Hellblade 2, Astrobot, an indie title called Mind Cop, another indie title that I loved that I think is hilarious called Thank Goodness You're Here. I also played Helldivers 2, Sonic X Shadow Generations, and Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. And oh boy, there are still a lot of games that I still want to play from this year that I just have not gotten to. Those are Black Myth Wukong, Stellar Blade, the remake for Silent Hill 2, the Dragon Quest III HD 2D remake, which I need to play, Nine Souls, Fantasian Neo Dimension, Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, Neva, Octopath Traveler 2, and Unicorn Overlord, and there's just so many. This year I also decided to earn some platinum trophies on PlayStation, and typically this is something that I don't normally do. I mentioned a couple of them earlier. The ones that I mentioned were Tales of Kenzera Zhao and Animal Well, but I had also platinumed Astrobot and Astro's Playroom. Cool thing about Astro's Playroom is that it's preloaded onto every PS5, so I want to say that kind of got me into it mainly, and then I did Animal Well right after that. Another game that I platinumed was Grease. This is a very short game, the game that the developers of Neva had made prior to Neva, and so with Neva I am interested in and looking forward to playing that. And I also went back to an early PlayStation 4 title, Infamous Second Son, to go and platinum that as well. All I needed to do was essentially complete the game on expert mode, so I just went ahead and did that and was reminded of how fun the game is. It was really fun switching between the different abilities that you have in the game, and I think the story was really good, and yeah, just a lot of good positive things to say about Infamous Second Son. Now, if that was enough, I also picked up a PlayStation 3. This was a console that is a bit of a blind spot for me during the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 era, and all of my friends were playing on Xbox 360, so that's where I more gravitated towards during that generation. So because of this, there's a lot of games that I missed out on that generation, like the Resistance trilogy, the first two Infamous games, Heavenly Sword, and Metal Gear Solid 4, and many more. There's a lot to get to with that, so I'll be busy for the next several months, if not years, with the PlayStation 3 library. I also visited Japan this year for the second time. I was there back in 2016 for around 4.5 months for my college's study abroad program. This time, though, I was there for around 10 days with the goal of attending the Tokyo Game Show. I'll talk a little bit about what I played, but just quickly, I love Japan so much. It is my favorite country to visit. And leading up to the show, I went all over Tokyo, back to my old stomping grounds and favorite restaurants and game stores. It was just fantastic. And so just a quick little Tokyo Game Show recap. I really enjoyed going to this event. The event itself is split up into multiple days. One where it's more catered towards business and business-centered days, while others are for the public days. And the public days are extremely busy, very packed, moving through the halls. While they do have a ton of halls to walk through, it was still extremely busy. Tons and tons, hundreds of thousands of people in attendance. Just I'll mention quickly the amount of themed and game-related bags and travel bags that I was handed to and got is ridiculous, and I think it might deserve its own video at some point. With all this busyness, I was able to play a few games, one of which, my personal game of the show that I played was Path of Exile 2. Another one that I played was Sonic X Shadow Generations. I played the demo for Neva, and a bunch of indie games like Color Limb, The Eternal Life of Goldman, a game called Blades of Mirage, Zeroes, Tarnished Blood, Empire of the Ants, Veiled Edge, and a game called Critadel. There were some games that I wanted to play, though, including Phantom Blade Zero and Monster Hunter Wilds. Thankfully, a demo for Monster Hunter Wilds released to the public just a few weeks later. When I was in Japan, I made the decision to purchase a Sega Saturn. This is the successor to the Genesis. It's Sega's second to last home console released before the Dreamcast, and it released in Japan in 1994 prior to the PlayStation 1. This ultimately led to its near irrelevancy, and it came out in the US the following year. I didn't obviously know about the system until much later in my life, but I've always had an appreciation and an eye on this thing for this early 3D graphics-based machine. And I picked up a solid variety of games to go along with it. Puyo Puyo Sun, an arcade matching puzzle game, Japanese role-playing games like Lunar, Albert Odyssey, and fighting games such as Virtual On, Virtua Fighter, and Toshin Den Ura, or Ultimate Revenge Attack Ura. Back home in the States, I was able to find some US releases like Madden 98, Hexen, and of course, Nights into Dreams. Nights is a series of games created by the people and team who made Sonic the Hedgehog. It's familiar in terms of art style, but a little bit different in terms of gameplay. I've been to Tokyo now twice, so if I were to go back, I totally want to explore some other areas like either Hokkaido or Osaka, so I think that would be really cool on a next visit. And overall, gaming this year has been bountiful and plentiful. There is no shortage of games to play. There are so many out that it is sometimes hard to manage. And now I guess with this sort of main last segment, I want to go into talking about the news. And I'm recording this the week of the Game Awards. The Game Awards are a yearly show held by Jeff Keighley, and this year there was a little bit of controversy where Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree was being included for Game of the Year. Now, In my opinion, I think that's fine. I don't really have a problem with it. It is inextricably tied to the base game. You do have to get to certain points in order to even access the DLC, but it did release this year, sort of as its own product, sort of not. You know what? In my opinion, I think Game of the Year should ultimately include any brand new game that was released within the year. So I would have liked to see this in its own category, maybe best DLC or best expansion or whatever. If you played it, you know that it's a very good game. I do think it deserves to be up there. Now, I don't necessarily think it'll win. It's up there with the other nominees for Game of the Year are Astrobot, Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Metaphor ReFantazio. My personal pick is going to Metaphor ReFantazio. I have not played Balatro, I have not played Black Myth Wukong, but just looking at all of those games, I would put Metaphor personally up there at the very top. Now, it is also very possible that Balatro wins Game of the Year. The Game Awards is not shy of giving awards and these higher Game of the Year awards to independent titles. Most well known, a lot of people are already aware of this, but the game It Takes Two won Game of the Year in 2021. So, Balatro being an independent title, I think that it's great to be up there. Do I have an opinion on whether it's going to win? No, I haven't played it. I'm not too much into card games, so I can't really say ultimately, but I do think it's cool that it's up there. And there are two categories for independent games: best independent game and best debut indie game. Animal Well is on both of these lists. I'm, of course, going with that, but, Balatro is also on this list, too. There are some games that I haven't played here, like UFO 50 does look like a lot of fun. Pacific Drive is something that I'm interested in, but placing that way back on my backlog. And I'll quickly just go through the most anticipated game category. This is for games all supposedly, hopefully, releasing within the next year that are highly anticipated. And those are Death Stranding 2 on the Beach, Ghost of Yotei, Grand Theft Auto 6, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and Monster Hunter Wilds. Now, I'm excited for all of these games, but out of all of them, I am most excited for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. I have personally been most anticipating this game for years now. The Metroid Prime trilogy, which started on the GameCube, is one of my favorite trilogies in gaming. And so I'm just super excited for the next entry. It's been so long. I can't wait. I know that it's very, very likely that Grand Theft Auto 6 will win this category. That game is bigger than life itself, but I've still voted with my personal pick of Metroid Prime 4. And ultimately, I think it's going to be a good show. I didn't even mention all of the announcements that are going to be made for new games, which I'm definitely excited for those. I'll try to provide my thoughts when it's all said and done, maybe on the next episode. But those are my thoughts on the Game Awards. In addition, there have been a lot of Switch 2 rumors going around. I would love for this to sort of imitate the original launch of the Switch, where it released in March of 2017. I have been predicting that they'll announce this sometime within the beginning of the year, maybe in January. I think that sounds about right. And then launch it between March and June. I think March might be a little bit early at this point, so maybe like a May or June release sounds a little bit more reasonable. I think it would be sick to launch with Metroid Prime 4, but I don't think it will. I think that will make for a great holiday title if it does release next fall. And I'm a huge fan of the Nintendo Switch. I remember lining up on launch day for the Nintendo Switch when it launched back in 2017, and I was still in college. I've had the same one the entire time. Really, I didn't make the jump to the OLED model, and of course I didn't really need or didn't really have the need to pick up the Switch Mini, the smaller Switch. So basically what I need a bigger screen, make it more powerful. I'll be happy. This is something I'm going to buy as immediately as possible when it goes live. I have no doubt that this will be a total impulse buy for me. As I said, I've had the launch version of the Switch since it released in 2017. So with all of these new bells and whistles, yeah, I'm obviously getting this 100%. Finally, I just want to mention two games that released recently around the same time that are both live service games, but completely opposite games, and they couldn't be any more different than they tried from one another. One of which is Infinity Nikki, a whimsical 3D adventure game where you control the character Nikki, completing challenges and platforming through the world, collecting stars or wishes, similar to that of Super Mario. The other game, Path of Exile 2, is a dark, gritty action RPG in the style of Diablo or other view from the top down dungeon crawlers, and it's chock full of blood, gore, guts, with visceral, satisfying combat. I'm playing both of these at the same time, going back and forth between the two, and I'll try to give my thoughts on the next video or the next episode. But for now, thank you for tuning in to the first of hopefully many episodes and discussions. I truly appreciate you coming by. Feel free to leave a like, a comment, and if you choose to subscribe, please click the bell so that you're notified of future episodes. Thank you. Take care.